I think Michael is the host. We already 2 minutes past.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, ready.
Good.
Okay, join palms and bow. 4 great vows. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless vexations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. Okay, today we continue on with our discussion of Madhyamika and how it applies to Chan. And hold on a second, I have to push all the buttons, make myself legal here. And the book that I've been reading from is this book. It's an old book, Central Philosophy of Buddhism, a study of Madhyamika System by T.R.V. Murti. This is the book. And it is one that is wordy and scholarly in its way. But I've wanted to go through parts of it simply to give you a feel for it. One, a historical feel, and two, doctrinally, where Chan comes from in terms of its approaches in terms of things. And I think that this book is very, very good in that respect. And the chapter I'm talking about is discussing absolute and phenomena. And we know from past classes that in the Madhyamika school, they have a 2 truths doctrine, which is apparent reality and absolute reality. We've also discussed, and kind of this is parallel to some of the other classes I've been teaching in terms of what is this reality? Does it exist or does it not exist? And it's very, very interesting because when we speak of something that exists, then we already are creating an idea of a duality, that there is something that does not exist. And so right away we say, does it exist in relation to what? For instance, does a human exist? Or does a ghost exist? And so you say, in relation to what? In relation to the human realm, the ghosts do not exist. In the relation to the ghost realm, the ghosts exist, the humans do not exist. And so it's very interesting. You are creating this kind of a duality where when we look at ekayana, just mind, then that kind of an analysis does not work. This conceptualization, it does not apply. But it's difficult for us because we have grown up with language. We've grown up with conceptualization. And so it's difficult for us to abandon that. It's ingrained in our DNA in terms of making choices in terms of things. And it's something that it's difficult for us to depart from. And the Madhyamika school is one in which, representing the middle way, it doesn't talk about exist or non-exist. It just talks about the realization of truth. And so we're going to go with that kind of a premise to see this. And again, what I'm discussing with you is very, very deep and profound Madhyamika doctrine, but I'm going to try to take it down to bite-sized pieces for you to digest. And then you'll get an idea, and then you'll see how the Chan masters were using this as part of their system of understanding how they use this. They borrowed from the Yogacara school, Abhidharma school, anything that worked, and put them all together in terms of understanding it without necessarily having to negate anything. Once we begin to negate or dispute things, then we get into the realm of a scholar. And the Chan was using these as expedient means. And these expedient means were were means in which one was enabled to depart from the idea of cogitation and into contemplation and feel the intuitive aspect of this practice. So let's see where we pick up here. It discussed that words do not denote the absolute in any recognizable sense. So that's something when we say it's beyond words and phrases. That's Chan right there. The absolute is commensurable and inexpressible. It is utterly transcendent to thought. And so this is very interesting. So they're saying, and then they say sunya, which is empty. So it's transcendent to thought, which is very interesting because this is where the transcendent is. The transcendent is not in a human becoming a Buddha. We start with the idea that you already are using the Buddha mind. So then how do we get to where we're going? We've got to change the channel. The way we change the channel, and we've talked about this many, many times, is that one has to turn the mind's eye inward and enable to use the mind's own perception versus the fabricated perception of the five skandha of form, sensation, perception, volition, and consciousness, and looking at those and saying that from there things come from. But it's not in this way. It is in this other intuitive way, which is not so easy for us to be able to get to that point. So the appellation ceases with the absence of the objects of thought. The absolute as the essence of all things is not born, does not cease to be. This page here. Implicate the norm of all things. The absolute does not possess any attribute of its own. So they say, well, what is mine? And probably the closest thing that we can say that mind has as an attribute is not really an attribute as a characteristic of form or anything, but pratika samapada, cause and conditions never fail. So within mind, this is an understanding, but we can't really call it an attribute, although it is something of the self-nature of mind. This is something that is real and not false because it is something that happens. But this reality then points directly to mind itself and not to some characteristic of mind. It's just pointing to how mind works. Ergo are the classes that I teach, which is mind work. Its presence can be indicated by an ascribed mark. It is asked, how can the anasamsara, literally the inexpressible. So this idea of anasamsara is in Sanskrit the inexpressible. It cannot be described, be understood and taught. And then in the word taught there, they put in parentheses declared. And that's kind of like what I say is that I don't really teach the Dharma, I present the Dharma. And so this is very consistent with this author, Murti, is showing it's not really teaching. The absolute is known as the reality of appearances, what they falsely stand for. This is a really great statement that's being made here. Let me repeat it to you. It says that the absolute, so we're talking about mind itself, is known as the reality of appearances. And what is the reality of appearances? What do we know about the reality of appearances? Anybody want to weigh in? Nobody? You just think everything is real? You want me to go back to teaching the Theravada Dharma? What is the reality of appearances? Nobody. All these sagacious people here have been studying for years, and you cannot respond. What a bunch of chickens. I didn't raise you as baby chicks to become chickens.
Well, I mean, the reality of appearances is that it's just appearances. It's just appearances appearing within mind.
Which means, keep going.
Emptiness.
Impermanent.
Impermanent. Okay, all of these are the same as what Ian is saying, and you can keep adding to that, but this is the reality of the appearances, is that they're appearing within mind, they belong to mind, they're illusory, they're impermanent, and they're fundamentally empty. So when it says the absolute is known as the reality of appearances, then what this is the perception of mind is fully aware that something is an appearance. It doesn't have to make it go away. It doesn't have to make thought go away. It doesn't have to make samsara go away. It simply has to see the things as they really are. And then it says this at the end. So what they falsely stand for. So it's very interesting because they're saying this is the reality of it and of appearances and what they falsely stand for. Why would he put what they falsely stand for at the end? This is very, very important what he's saying here. If you want to read this stuff, you just can't just go by and read one sentence and go to the next. You have to say, why is he saying what they falsely stand for? Nobody?
They
Because-
falsely.
Oh, I was just going to go ahead, Ian.
No, you go, Harry. I had I went for the first one.
All right. Because we deluded beings take them to be real. To be real objects.
And where is this we?
The appearance of we.
The appearance of we, which is perceived by what?
Mind.
By mind. By mind. Exactly. It is in this way. What they falsely stand for, and mind is making this erroneous assumption. No one else. There is no individual ego, personality, life, and being that is making an erroneous assumption about the world. It is a dream. What is unborn, uncreated is mind itself. This is why this is very carefully written. And when I read this, before I got to what it falsely stood for, my mind was thinking something missing, boom. And then he puts that in there and I'm going, that's it. That is a really, really good statement. It's something that I could not correct if somebody said that. And that's what's important here is that we're looking at this and we're looking at it from the idea of mind, not from a sentient being that's making an erroneous assumption, but the very fact that you believe you're an individual sentient being is an erroneous, false position. And that's what Madhyamika was saying is, don't talk to me about what's real and not real, because if we talk about what's real and not real, and we talk about what exists and doesn't exist, as to who? As to what? How could we talk about those things? Nagarjuna was right. You can't talk about those things. You have to look at this and see. When we get here, it's a dead end. The self cannot go further. As I mentioned, I think in the last class that I did yesterday, it's like you're not invited to the party. You don't have the credentials to get in. You've got fake ID. Okay, you can't get there. Okay, we continue on. This is good stuff. I hope you guys get excited about this, because this is really important. Okay, it can change everything in terms of the way that you practice. By discovering, removing the superimposed character of phenomena, the true nature of the absolute is revealed. What a wonderful statement. Very incredible. By discovering, and you go, you know what? I thought I had the other day, remember, I thought I had an eye problem, right? I couldn't see anything because I had two contacts in one eye. And so, I couldn't see anything. When I took out the one contact, I could see. It was very much a miracle, right? No, it was always that way. It's just that I superimposed a contact onto the contact that I had. And as a result of that, then when I removed the contact, then I realized that I could see clearly. This is what Murti is talking about here in terms of Madhyamika, is looking at that which is superimposed onto the mind. What is superimposed onto the mind? I'm waiting. What is superimposed onto the mind?
Self, appearances.
Self and appearances. And that, go a little further.
Well, they're those superimpositions are, they're completely illusory, and if you like sort of look into what they are and where they came from, you arrive right back at the clarity of mind. You see what they are seen, they are known as just being appearances.
So the harm is in what?
Not noticing, not realizing that an appearance hasn't arisen, and it just being an appearance.
So you're taking Rick's line there. What to know the arising mind is the non-arising mind. But here is the harm is not realizing that it is an illusion, that it is not the fundamental mind. Like the Shurangama Sutra said when with Ananda, when the Buddha yelled at him, he said, Ananda, that's not your mind. And he's going, what? Because he still was using the perception from the five skandha, not from mind itself. So this superimposing of the idea of the self is something. And what is important here is that mind is still there. Mind is there. It's not something that is has been defiled. It is just all of these things appear in accordance with Pratika Samappada. So we know the mind's still acting impeccably, even though it's clouded and creating these kinds of circumstances. So it's very, very interesting, but we have to see that all of this comes from mind. So we continue. So I'm hoping that this will give you a lot to contemplate, a lot to think, a lot to look at and say, hey, this doesn't make sense, or there's a contradiction or whatever. I welcome you to bring those up. because this is precisely what's happening with the Madhyamika school here. And it says, technically, this is called, and I will take a crack at it, but I've practiced it about 10 times and I haven't gotten any better with it. It's called Adyarvo Pavadan Yaya, and it is the method of removing ascriptions. So this is the method of removing ascriptions. We say, oh, we ascribe to that. Well, what's that? You know, I ascribe to this religion. Well, what's that religion? Let's look at it and let's see what's there, you know, and you are, you know, the Martian Space Party religion. And let's go and look and see that what does that, you know, what are the tenets of that? Because that's, you're ascribing to that. So here, as you're thinking and you're looking at things, you're ascribing to something that is not real. So this process of removing those cataracts from your eyes is the practice. So the practice is one. That's why I always say, look at the things that's seen. See pratika samapada in the present moment. Walk around this world as if it's a dream, and seeing how it's formed, and see what's there, rather than investing in the dream. Invest in mind, and removing these ascriptions that are being superimposed onto the mind. This is very deep stuff, because it's showing you exactly how to practice. It's showing you how to meditate. You don't superimpose your method onto the consciousness. Quite to the contrary, the method and contemplation is like applying Windex to the screen. And all of that stuff that was on there, that film, is coming off naturally. Okay. Phenomena are utilized as devices, upaya, upaya, to reach unconditioned, to reach the unconditioned. So it's saying the phenomena are utilized as devices. So upaya means a skillful mean, and there's a term called upaya kashalya, which means it's expedient, clever means. And so in this expedient and clever means is what we're doing is we are looking into mind. We are looking through these appearances. We don't have to eliminate those appearances, but we're looking through the fundamental tenets in our consciousness that we take that to be reality. And we go beyond that. And in doing so, we're able to apply pratika samapada to everything, constant conditions. We realize the nature of why these things are appearing. Where they're appearing is in mind. Why they're appearing is in accordance with pratika samapada. How they appear is the self-nature of mind. So we're using these skillful means in anything that's arising to see through it, to reach the unconditioned, the paramatha. So the Martha, excuse me, is this unconditioned. So what is the unconditioned? We've talked about that before. Does anybody remember what the definition of unconditioned means? Come on, don't let Eon take them all. He doesn't even have any competition here because Sentha's gone. So, and Harry's tooted in already. So it's got to be somebody that knows what the unconditioned means. See, because I don't want to use the words and then assume that you know what they mean when you don't. You just look like you're going, this is very interesting. You don't know what the unconditioned is.
Paramata.
you looked at it. Yeah. And what does paramanta mean? Let me see. Unconditioned. The unconditioned is mind itself, that which does not change. The conditioned mind is, we could say, is the arising mind, the things that arise and have appearances to them. Those appearances are conditioned by pratika samappada. The mind itself is what enables the condition to arise. So when we are beginning to remove appearances from the mind, it's like we keep digging down deeper and deeper and deeper until finally we hit solid ground. We haven't hit solid ground yet. We keep digging and digging and digging, and the soil becomes looser and looser and looser until finally we hit the bedrock. The bedrock is the unconditioned. It's never changed. It's always there. And that is mind itself. We've never seen that. In fact, as we begin to dig, what happens is mind, then there's a revelation that mind is just mind. And there's no longer a digging or a searching for it, because it is now flipped, and the perception of mind is just there. If one keeps digging and then says, Eureka, I found it. No, you haven't. You have to cover that hole up and dig somewhere else, because you haven't found anything. Mind will find you. Mind defines you. So we continue on. So it says, once you reach the unconditioned, which is their end, the end is the end of phenomena. There is no other means of expressing the inexpressible. So he's saying, this is as close as you can get with words, and you can't have any other way that we could say what is inexpressible. Otherwise, it would not be inexpressible, right? Wouldn't make any sense. Can you explain to me the inexpressible? Huh? If I could explain to you the inexpressible, then it would be expressible, not inexpressible. So therein lies the rub, is that we cannot use cogitation to discover this. We need practice. We need to bring our mind into accord with mind in order for it to do it, so that it will absorb all of this, and you just have to go like, is it like if you're in the South and you had a big piece of bread and you're just sopping up gravy and sopping it up on the plate until finally there's nothing left there. It's just the plate. And that's your bedrock. And it has nothing to do with all of the stuff that you sopped up, except for the fact that it holds all of that. Although an ascribed character may not constitute the real, ascribed, again, is something that has been conjured up, that has been given a name, a place, a thing, a concept. So an ascribed character may not constitute the real, yet it can indicate it as its ground. Let me continue on. Even an ascribed mark can serve the purpose of definition. In one sense, it may be said that the cognition of everything is the cognition of the absolute, because it is that which appears under these varied and veiled forms. Now, that's a whole lot, what I just said to you. I'm going to break it down to you so that you could understand it. And it's kind of like, wow, Today, I was actually studying the Madhyamika school. This is heavy stuff, but it's easy if we break it down. So what they're saying is that even if it's ascribed that it's a thing, and we have this thing, an apple, and so you say, oh, so this apple can serve as proof of the mind itself by the virtue of its appearance. And again, if we come back in 100 years, the apple will no longer be an apple, but by virtue of its impermanence, it subscribes to the reality of mind, constantly changing. So even though it is something that is not real, it nevertheless presents to us the reality of mind itself. It's testifying to it. Shifu used to always say, everything is testifying to the mind all the time, always testifying to it. He would say, you go and look outside. What do you see? Impermanence, impermanence, impermanence. Anicca, anicca, anicca. That was what Goenka, Su's earlier mentor, used to always say. Of course, he said it different than I did. He'd say, anicca, anicca, anicca. But it was impermanence. Impermanence. Everything is impermanent. And so it's saying that even this represents the reality. So we cannot just simply throw the apple out. And even if we tried to throw the apple out, where would it land? It would probably land on the geese that were flying away from the pond. But they're still hanging around.
What are you doing?
I'm sorry?
This for myself and one for she wants one too.
Why are you using another cup? She has a cup.
Yeah.
She has a cup.
But this?
Yeah.
I can use that.
I'm sorry, I did not understand what you said. So in any case, we'll continue on. I've only gotten this far on the page right now so far, and I wanted to try to get at least to maybe 2 pages. So then it continued on. The cognition of everything is the cognition of the absolute, because it is that which appears under these varied and veiled forms. So what it's saying is that the absolute is what appears under these uncountable and veiled forms. So what is there under all of that is mind. It is reflected in mind. It is created by mind. So it is mind, and it's looking at it, and it's perfectly in its place, impeccably, that the causes and conditions never fail. Form is not other than emptiness. Emptiness is not other than form. What's the next line? Anybody? I'm throwing you a softball. What's the next line? Form is not a
Form is
Form is
precisely emptiness. Emptiness is precisely form.
Precisely. It is just in this way. It's precise. It never fails. It's precise. All the way through to consciousness. Consciousness is empty. Emptiness is consciousness. They're precisely in this way. It doesn't fail. And so when we see that, we know that the underpinnings of all of this is mind itself. The appearances upon mind are mind. This is the orientation of turning the mind's eye inward and looking at things from a correct viewpoint. In another sense, the absolute is not known through any of these forms, for it is not a particular entity. We really know it when nothing else is before us. Is when we say we really know it is when nothing else is before us, is when we begin to contemplate. When we're sitting on our cushion and we're contemplating our method, nothing is before us. When we relax the mind and we're in the present moment and we're coursing through the environment, nothing is before us. We perceive in this way. We see everything is precisely appearing. And because it's precisely appearing, because it's mind, there is no obstructions in the mind. It doesn't mean that you get to a point where nothing is there. It's just that it doesn't get in the way. This is the correct way when we say, having no obstructions in the mind, we can attain anyatara samyak sambodhi, this perfected wisdom. How? Not by removing things. So it would be real easy for me. I'll say, look, this is the way you do this. You want to get rid of self? Watch. And you go, I still see your arm. That's not the way we do it. You don't sit on your cushion and try to do that. Okay? You don't do that. You see through these things that are superimposed onto the mind. What Murti is doing here, and doing a wonderful job of doing this, is he's telling you exactly how mind works, exactly how it works. This is really wonderful stuff that he really got to the heart of the Madhyamika studies. Now, there might be some scholars out there going, Murti was an old fart. He didn't, what did he know? We know this and this. Don't listen to that. This person really took the time to lay this out in a way that he has mastered the Madhyamika school. I cannot say this person was an enlightened person. It just simply, he laid it out the best that could be for someone to see it and say, isn't it just this way? Okay. So he had said, we really know it when there's nothing before us. What that means is there's nothing before us. That's when the master was saying, I see nothing before me. And the young monk said, but Shifu, I'm here. He goes, I see you. And the master said, but I don't see you. Then there's nothing before him. You see? Does he see the monk? Of course he sees the monk. Does he see the monk as a name? No, he sees it as mind. He's clear as to the proper orientation. And then comes the next part. The real language is what? 20 bonus points if you can understand this. The real language is what? Come on, this is an easy one. You don't know what the real language is?
It's silence, but because I got the book here.
What a chip.
Oh, well.
What a chip.
So we get the point, right? I mean, we're all silent.
You don't get the points on that. You spend like 10 years in a Viki hell for impersonating a Chan master. Okay. And I'm in such a good mood that it'll only be 5 years. Okay. In any case, the true language is silence. What? It's there, you see? It's right there. You can't hear it? The absolute is totally free from conception. It is not open to thought. So it's not open to thought. And you say, let me think about this. No, it just does. It doesn't have to think about things. It's spontaneous. And that's what's really important. And that is something that's incredible with the mind. It is spontaneous. It can see the things that are going to happen. It sees it and it's clear about it. And when it happens in this way, it works really wonderful. The other day, I was talking with this one person, an attorney on the other side on a case, and we were going to try to settle a case. And he gave me actually a pretty reasonable offer to settle the case. I was kind of surprised about that. And he said, well, you know, I kind of subscribe to this Zen, and I try to apply it in my life. I go, really? And so as I was talking to him, he showed very great interest in that. And so we were talking a little bit about settling the case, and we're talking about stuff. And I said, you might want to Google me and put CHAN on the back end. And he did, and he was so surprised. But at that point, the whole case was revealed to me as to what he would say, what I would say, what I would do, what I would offer, what he would counter offer. And so for the last 3 days, I've been waiting for it to come to pass, which today in the afternoon, it came to pass, exactly the figure that I thought would come up and that we would accept. That it made my client happy. It made him happy and his clients happy and made me happy. And it's interesting because all of that happens in an instant. There's no formulation. It is just seen in that way. You see that it doesn't always happen that way, but the mind is capable of obtaining all this information and guiding it in this way, especially when the person on the other side has a like-minded heart. It made it very easy for that to come to fruition. And the thing is, you cannot interject your self-greed. Well, if he's willing to offer this, and I'll go way high up. You don't do that. You do the things that will bring it to a harmonious end. And the mind is in this way that has that ability to make these actions in a way that, and these decisions without really making a decision. It just is. You see it very, very clearly. Not bad, right? That's something worth practicing. That's a pretty good byproduct to get through the world, is you can anticipate the things. Unfortunately, sometimes you can anticipate things that are very, very bad. That's just part of the whole thing. Okay, we continue on. Transcendence of the absolute must not be understood to mean that it is an other that lies outside the world of phenomena. This is very, very important. So if we're saying that we're going to transcend to the absolute, it is not something that we say that, as soon as I get my aviator pin, I'm going to be able to fly like the angels, and I'll turn into an angel and fly away. It isn't in this way. That's what people think. People think that there's going to be this cosmic change in them, and all of a sudden, like Tron or something, they're going to get this electronic body that can, go everywhere. It isn't in this way. It is just understanding that's your original nature. You already have that, but that all you're doing is you're getting rid of the dross, and to go into the true metal that's there. Doesn't mean that the dross is nothing. It is just simply part of the whole process. But mind is just mind. There is no putting something down to pick something up. This is very, very important. But people, nevertheless, they go to retreats and they sit there, and they want to become enlightened. And it's the biggest waste of time to have this kind of an attitude. It's better to do mind work and understand how mind works. Then you have a chance at being able to put down all of these habitual patterns. If you can do that, then you can make progress. If not, then you're just simply there trying to polish that tile to make it a diamond. So then he continues, there are not two sets of real. And see, now he's talking about the two truths of Nagarjuna, of apparent reality and absolute reality. And he's saying those are not really two truths, like the way that you think that this is true and this is true. Nagarjuna just laid it out and said, it's beyond cognition. But the people say, well, I want to know what you mean by beyond cognition. Well, that's ludicrous. It's like asking them to say, and also, explain what inexpressible means. What's inexpressible. So he continues, because this is really important to have these basic fundamentals down when we begin to practice in the right way. So it says that the absolute is the reality of the apparent. So the absolute is the reality of the apparent. It is not the other way around. The apparent is not the reality of the absolute. The apparent appears within the absolute. So we cannot say it is not real, because it is the reality of the apparent, you see. So it's very interesting, because it's speaking in a whole different language. We're not talking about concepts here anymore. You have to use your intuitive side to try to make this connection. Try to feel this intuitive part. If you can do that, it will work. Okay. It is their real nature. Okay. So the real nature of the appearances is mind itself. That makes sense, because it comes from mind. It was born from mind. Sometimes I say that the appearances are made of the fabric of mind. That's a kind of a good way of looking at things, that everything is this fabric of mind. Conversely, phenomena are the veiled form or false appearance of the absolute. So when we see it and we say, oh, well, it's kind of like saying the same thing, but kind of in a reverse way, and saying, well, the absolute, the apparent, apparent phenomena is the absolute. Why? Because but for mind, there would be no apparent phenomena. If this position is discontinence, the two reals are accepted. So they're saying discontinent means if you don't see this in this way, then, and if you go with the two reals and you say, oh, there's two truths, one is apparent reality and absolute reality. This is something that in the Theravadan, Abhidharma, they were saying everything is real. So everything is real. And then what did Kuan Yin say, Avalokiteshvara say to Sariputra about that? Anybody know? Nobody knows what Kuan Yin said to Sariputra. I failed you guys.
In the Heart Sutra.
Go ahead. Go for it, Rick.
Sariputra, form is none other than emptiness. Emptiness is none other than form.
And
Form is precisely emptiness. Emptiness.
there you go.
is form.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's only taken him like 25 years of being my senior student. So in any case, very good. It is in this way that we see that sunyata is now being revealed as much more weightier than just simply an emptiness of things. It's the opposite. The emptiness is mind itself, that which holds everything. You know, we've got Michael there, so it includes the matter and the antimatter. It holds all of that. Okay. So it says, if the two reals are accepted, there would be no point in calling one of them absolute and the other appearance, right? It wouldn't make any sense. You would say absolute. Well, what's the absolute? Well, it's kind of like, you know, we have a president and then we have a dictator. Well, which one is it? Is it the president or is he the dictator? You know, doesn't make any sense. Well, one of them's not real, you know, and this is the one that's the true one, the mind king. And so they're pointing to this, and when they're talking about the reality of it, they're not talking about two different things. They're just pointing out that these appearances there, and they don't negate it, because if you negated appearances, then you'd be negating mind and the function of mind and how mind works. So the Madhyamika school was very, very careful about not doing that or certifying that it was all real, because it wouldn't make sense if everything was all real, because then you would have the two truths as being separate and apart from each other. But that's not what Madhyamika is saying. But it's misunderstood in this way. So it says the absolute is the reality of the apparent. It is their real nature. Conversely, phenomena are the veiled form or false appearance of the absolute. So when we see it, then we don't negate it, but we don't give it any credence as being the absolute. It's not a standalone. But for mind, it would not exist. Well, does it exist or not exist? It doesn't really exist or not exist because it belongs to mind. And if everything belongs to mind, there's nothing to say that something doesn't exist or exists. So when they were talking about that and saying about that, they'd say both would be equally unconditionally real. The absolute as lacking determinations. And they're saying if both of them were real, then the one that would be less real would be the absolute, because the absolute doesn't have any attributes to it. It doesn't ascribe to anything. So that which ascribes to something would be real, but that's putting it in the back way, saying that the appearances are real and the absolute is. It doesn't make any sense to say that. So we can only say apparent reality is real in the context of its function within mind, or that in its operation within mind. This is really, really important, because you have to look at this, and then you look at the world and you go, oh, I see. This is all a dream, but it's a dream of mind. the absolute is only real, and it is identical with phenomena. The difference between the two is epistemic. Epistemic is a fancy word that says that it's related to knowledge. You have to kind of like figure it out, but that's how professors talk, right, Anyi? So they use all these fancy words when they could use a simple word, kind of like attorneys. We do the same thing. Okay, subjective and not real. So if we talked about it in a different way, then we would get into the subjective argument as to whether it's real or not, and that would be conceptual. So it would not work. In full accordance with this, Nagarjuna declares that there's not the least difference between the absolute and the universe. The universe viewed as a whole is the absolute. So the universe viewed as a whole is the absolute. So if it's viewed as a whole, it's the absolute. So if you look at and just think of anything, using the universe to mean anything that is appearing, then we say as a whole, say, well, that's absolute. Why? Because it's appearing within mind. All right, we got that part. So then we look at it from a different view. Viewed as a process, it is phenomenal. So we know that where it comes from, but as a process, we know it's phenomenal. And what is the nature of phenomena? What is the fundamental nature of phenomena? Sue, you can tell me from your past studies.
What was the question again?
What is the fundamental nature of phenomena?
It's the form.
Form is better.
Form, yeah.
I like my
Because
hearing
that is
better.
the emptiness.
FOAM, foam.
Yes.
Anicca. It's impermanent. Its nature is impermanent. So when seen in this way, when viewed as a process, it's impermanent. We know it belongs to mind. And so we cannot negate it and say it is not real, exists, or doesn't exist. But we go beyond whether it exists or non-exist. We know that it belongs to mind, but it is still a phenomenon. Okay. So then it says, having regard to causes and conditions constituting all phenomena, we call this world the phenomenal world. This world, when causes and conditions are disregarded, the world as a whole is called the absolute. So we don't negate, we don't have to go around and say this world is not real. Mind intuitively knows what it is. Why? Because it belongs to mind. Mind itself generated it. Okay. One last little bit. There are some people, what he talks absolutists, that have fallen into an illusion of a double process. It's kind of like they see things as a fall from grace, where there was mind, and then there was a falling out of grace, and there's a defilement within mind, and then the process of recovering that is recovering the grace of mind, and saying that something kicked this all off. This is the difficult part. And I'm glad that Murti addressed this issue, because we have to look at it and say, well, how in the heck did we get into this mess if mind is undefiled? Mind is fundamentally undefiled, and all of this is a dream. But it isn't something that was a fall from grace. It's just seeing the world as a dream and an illusion, and that the mind has never changed. The fundamental nature of the mind has never changed. It just simply followed causes and conditions. And this is what the Buddha taught with the 12 Nidana, how these things came into being. You can't look at your watch and say, well, it came into being 6,000 years ago or 60,000 years ago or whatever. We don't know when all of that began, but we know how the mind functions. So he said that, because he was saying that the initial transformation of the absolute into phenomena and its later reconversion into a pristine state through knowledge. And he says the Vaishnavadins invariably speak of consciousness as undergoing the process of defilement and purification. And he says all of this is wrong according to Madhyamika. There has been no initial fall, and there's no need for retransformation. Nirvana, Nagarjuna says, is non-ceasing and unachieved. There is only the dissolution of false views, but no becoming of the real. The absolute has always been one uniform nature, the Tathagata. And so he says the function of the Madhyamika dialectic is not to bring about change in things, but in our mentality. Therefore, it is declared in the text that through wisdom, the real things are not made unreal. Things themselves are unreal. Sunyata is not an arbitrary prescription, hang in there, to view things as unreal. It is a revelation of their intrinsic nature. So what he's saying is, forget about trying to say this is real and unreal, all of these things. It is a revelation of the intrinsic nature of mind. This is the awakening of the mind to see the mind exactly as it is, how it functions, how it processes. That is the realization that comes up. And that's what Madhyamika is. And it puts aside these ideas of trying to say something exists, doesn't exist, real, not real. So it says, and this frees the human mind of the cobwebs of false views and wrong perspectives. So this is the practice. We'll continue on next week with some more, but this is fundamental Madhyamika. But you can see Chan, where Chan is getting its roots is from a lot of this that's coming through and being processed and being applied, and using this as the process of the revelation of awakening to the reality or to the truth. And this truth does not negate other things. It just puts them in perfect alignment as to where they're at. Okay, so that's it for today. I know it was quite a bit. And I know I'm pushing you, but I intend to push you. You know, this is good stuff. And it's stuff that can really bring you along, especially when you go to a retreat, because you're able to apply these fundamental principles to the sitting Chan. And when you do that, you have a really good chance to break through and get some realizations or an awakening with it. So I hope that you can do that. And then Gilbert's shameless plug of speaking of retreats. Remember that I have a retreat coming up in July that was announced yesterday. So hopefully I can see some of your bright and shiny faces there. There's still a few seats left, right, Sue? They're going fast, but there's some up in the balcony that are still there.
I was promoting a top 10, so there are like 5 more seats left. But
when we get to that afterwards, we'll have the 18 arhats. So the next one will be the 18 arhats. So I have to come up with something after that.
You know, Julia, you are there. Julia didn't see the announcement, so I just sent to you privately. Check your WeChat.
Yeah, so good. I hope you know. I really want to give a strong representation, and this is kind of something that will show this kind of mind work school that we can represent and really turn out something. One of the last times I went to a DDRC, Goyen Fashe said that the retreat was very auspicious, and because the people were incredibly great practitioners, and he had mentioned how quiet it was at dinner time, and that it was incredibly, people were very, very mindful, and they were taking their practice with them everywhere they went. And you could see it and you could feel it, and even more so this time, we've got some really good veterans, and we have new people come and really have a great retreat with us. Okay. All right. I'll put some questions out there if anybody has questions. Or comments, because I don't know if this is getting through to you guys or is it way over your head or what. Go ahead, Michael.
So yeah, I have a comment to like you said that it was pointed out that the fundamental ignorance or the mistake which is committed is to mistake appearances for real. So it was a lot about talking about reality, and so I wondered, actually, what is real? How, if one would want to define it, how would one go about it to define what is real? And I thought maybe it has to do with attaching to something. Like, how would you define real without talking about real?
See, because you're painting it into you're painting the mind into a corner that it can't get out of. That is a naksara, the inexpressible. So you're asking the inexpressible, and it cannot be responded to by conceptual thinking. The inexpressible, it has to be intuitive. And so who was it? Thich Nhat Hanh, I think. No, it was Suzuki that said that God is God when he doesn't think he's God. And it's kind of an interesting way of approaching it, because when we say that God is God when he doesn't think he's God, when he thinks he's God, there's an idea of a self. But when one is using the intuitive, then there's no idea or identity of a thing or a process. And so that's very, very important in terms of how we look at things. And so your question is one that cannot be answered by words. It has to be, you have to use your intuitive sense. And when you sit to meditate, you have to apply the intuitive to it. That is the contemplation. And by settling and quieting the mind in this way, the self-nature of mind will be revealed. For sure, it will be revealed. It is the only way to do that, unless you kind of backed into it, just out of fatigue from thinking of things and just stop the mind. But it's a lot harder that way, and not as profound of a realization is if you use the correct way to get yourself to that state. The profoundness can be much greater, and you also have a greater chance of having that happen to you off the cushion, which can happen, and if it does, it's can be a much deeper experience than when you're sitting on the cushion. Okay. Questions? Nobody has questions? You guys all understand this? Yeah, Harry, and then Sue after. Go ahead, Harry.
You have to unmute, Harry. Okay, you're unmuted.
All right.
Yeah.
Please now.
I hope my connection. I just wanted to share something which may summarize a lot of what you said.
You got a bad connection, Harry.
Oh yeah. So Christian.
So we're only listening to like one syllable per word. So let me go to Sue and then see if you can reel it back in. If not, you can type it in. It sounds like you wanted to go somewhere good, so I do want to hear what you have to say. Sue, go ahead.
Well, I want to make a couple comments before my question. Why are we have 5 people recording? And I don't like to be recorded, but anyway, it's okay. We have 5 people recording this lecture. And then my second, huh?
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry. You must be looking at something.
Yeah, 5 recording here. But anyway, it's okay. You know, we could have 10 recording. But the second comment is that Ian, you know, you had to make a top 10, one of the top 10.
I sent in my my vaccination proof today, so I should be, fingers crossed, I might be able to make the list.
If I don't see you, I might drop out. Just kidding.
Then the whole thing will collapse.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be fine.
Yeah. My question today is, you know, I don't know which source of books you use. I must say I'm really confused because, you know, talking about emptiness and real and not real, but I'm only just one point I think I realized is the whole lecture is talking about anicca, impermanent, changing. Am I right? Do I get that point right?
No, but it was an important aspect of of phenomenal, from the phenomenal side. The most of it has to do with the unborn and uncreated mind. So
yes, that part I got it because you did say unconditional. Unconditional, it's only that part of mind, but the function, other function, it's the process you're talking about, process, changing, anicca. But all that real, unreal, and emptiness, I mean, was really confused. I'm sorry.
But that's good, and I'm glad that you're saying something like that, because when we look at things in this way, it's natural for you to be confused. You've been using this mind of habitual patterns for such a long time. It's difficult for you to break through, and for you, it's like your eggshell is so shattered. You know, I don't even know what's holding it up, but one day it's all going to fall. It's all going to fall, and you're going to see that this intuitive side, and when it falls, it literally just like completely dissolve, and all of this will make sense. What doesn't make sense is trying to think about it or use your cognition to try to define it, like Michael was trying to do, and say, well, how do we do this? And I'm saying, well, you can't do it in this way because it doesn't work in this way. It's beyond the intellect. It's beyond thought. And you go, well, that's stupid. Then that, if it's beyond intellect, it's got to be stupid. No, it isn't in that way. It is beyond that, because all of that is predicated upon worldly knowledge. that worldly knowledge has no ability to understand mind itself. So it's okay for you to be confused, because what you're confused about is how you perceive the world. There's the confusion. There's what's superimposed onto mind. Once mind is no longer looking at that and feeling it, then there'll be the progress, because all of this dross, like when you're making silver and you're cleaning it up and you're heating it up, there's all this little dust on the top, and all of that will just move away, and there will be the silver, there will be the shininess of the mind itself. And so when you see this, it will be there. The dross is also part of the silver. You're just seeing right through all of that. You don't have to actually even wipe it off. You just have to understand that underneath all of that is mind, and it will work. So when you say you're confused, that's good. Go ahead.
Well, I am confused about the presentation of the material that you presented, or Nagarjuna presented. But I am not confused about what you have been teaching so far of beyond the conceptual and beyond the thinking and use intuitive side of mind, like you answered Michael's question. That part I totally understand. It's the presentation of the material I'm really confused.
It is because the material is very scholarly in the manner in which it's presented. And as a result of that, hold on, my phone is going to die here soon. That I'm breaking down because it's written in a scholarly way. But it is, what I wanted to show is that it is consistent with the with what I've been presenting for many years. It's consistent all the way, and you can look back and you can say, well, here's what Madhyamika has to say about this. And so what I'm doing is breaking down what they're saying and translating it into Gilbert language that I use to present to you. So don't worry about all the fancy words that are there. Those words, I have to look them up, and I have my thing in terms of Sanskrit words that I look up, and and making sure I have the words right, and so that's something that's I have to do. What I want to do is try to give you something to give you an idea historically and doctrinally where this all comes from, and bringing it all the way back to mind itself. Okay, so yeah, that's fine. Don't worry about trying to understand this highfalutin language, of these scholars. They all talk that way, right, Anyi? So I pick on him because he's a professor, so I'm sure he has all that high level words, but he never uses them when I talk to him, though. Okay. Any other questions?
I think Harry raised his hand.
Oh, Harry, are you back?
I'm back. Michael just asked me to type, but I think my connection's better. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I just wanted to share, I found there's a formula that I found over the years that was helpful, I think summarizes some of what you're saying. It's from J. Krishnamurti, which is unconditional acceptance of the conditioned is the unconditioned.
I think this is a good way of saying it. You accept it, and that acceptance is actually seen through it.
Yeah.
So you see through the conditioned, and so is the conditioned mind. That's the one where I had presented to Rick so many years ago about to know the arising mind is the non-arising mind. It's saying the similar thing is that when we know the arising mind, when we know the conditioned mind, that is you're using the non-arising mind or the unconditioned mind to see that. And so, yeah, that's a really good way of saying it, whatever works for you in terms of looking at that. And then in everything that you do, you use this to look at the world. You know that anything that you see phenomenally is an appearance and it's conditional. So we are able to discern the conditions, from the conditions, what the causes were, and that what those conditions will produce will become a cause of a future condition. And when you see the world in this way, then it's precise. It's precise. The more we practice, the more we can get to the point where we see the world precisely as it is, and we become better predictors as to what's going to happen next, or what we should say in order to harmonize. So we use our mind in this way, not to manipulate, but to bring it to a harmonious environment. And once we do that, then there's no difference between the conditioned and the unconditioned. Those are working harmoniously. So yeah, it's a good way of saying it.
So Wendy has a question.
Go ahead.
My question is more about, I do everything I can to try to do the in-person retreat. If any condition that doesn't come true, which involves a lot of things, is there a possibility of online possibility? Like in here, we used to have in Vancouver, like in person, there is people in the Dharma hall and there is a computer. So there are two. There is, of course, a person who's doing that. So would it be possibility you have like both going on? Like if it's
I'm not sure. I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure if that will happen. That would have to be something that you'd have to talk to Goyan Pasha from DDRC to see if he would be interested in something of that nature. No, it's tough on a presenter to have a Zoom class. We just can't touch the people, or have them right before us. There's a loss of intimacy there. I understand what you're saying. I don't know if that would be something. I did not talk to them about that, but you could talk to them and see if there's some way that they can set up so that at least the lectures could be there. But I know when they did that retreat, the 1 week retreat, it required a much greater amount of personnel to conduct it than a regular in-person personnel. I think Harry was part of that, and so a few others were there. And I don't know how many people you had actually totally involved in this, but it must have been several. And so that would be something you'd have to talk to them about. I'm not adverse to doing that, but it's not something that I really have the time to invest to do that. But if I'm there, I wouldn't have a problem with a camera setup. Okay. Anyone else? Last chance. You guys all understood this, or you have a question? Again, this is tough stuff, but I every once in a while want to challenge you. And we went through some easier stuff for a while, so this is we'll probably do one more session of this, and then we'll go on to something else. But hang in there with it. It's worth it, and little by little, Sue, when you see this and when you're presented by people who ask questions about this, you'll be knowledgeable about it. And that's what's important, is that we have to be, especially senior students, have to be knowledgeable about what we're doing. Okay, we can't be just simply just practicing and being statues on a cushion. You know, I always said I don't train duck decoys that are just sitting there like some wooden duck floating on the pond. No, you have to be active and interactive with people and dynamic, and bring people to Chan and to show them in your zeal the right way to practice. That's important. That's what Shifu really stressed. I mean, he stressed education of his monastics so that they don't have they're not just doing ceremonial activities, that they have to really study and follow the Buddhas and study. And I want you to do the same. It's very, very important. The more that you understand this, the more that you'll really progress in the practice, because you as you start listening to what I say and reading what the masters say from the past and the sutras, you'll see that they all fit together perfectly. And so it's something that works very, very well. Okay, I think that's about it for today. Again, we'll pick it up next week. Please practice well, keep studying, and bring others to the practice as well. Okay? Omitofo, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, Gilbert.
Bye.
See you.
Gilbert.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Gilbert.
Gilbert.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gilbert.
Thank you all.
Omitofo.
Omitofo,
Thank
omitofo.
you.
See ya. Thank you, Michael. Take care now. Bye-bye,
Thank
Michael.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.